Wonderful. Okay, before starting, I would like to extend my thanks to Councillor Chan's invite for giving me the opportunity to work with you first time, budget committee member, and more importantly, the mayors, and also our esteemed budget chair for your support in this public engagement process. It is really amazing. It is really unprecedented after all these years. So pre-budget consultations in November. There will be now these local town hall with councillors. There will be telephone town hall, starting tomorrow night. And then there will be also be a couple of days, on January 22nd and 23rd for the public deputations. So there are plenty of opportunities. And let me give you a little bit intro about myself. I work in the city's financial planning division since 2005. Just like everyone here tonight, I'm also a Torontonian, and I believe in public service. So for this reason, I care about the budget because I believe budget is a policy document itself. The city budget reflects our city council and the mayor's priorities. They come with many thoughtful policy decisions behind it. But for me, like a city staff, our role is very important and relevant because we are delegated by city council to execute the budget to make sure that we are able to achieve the desired social objectives and outcomes. So I think everyone here appreciate the challenge in this year for the 2024 budget. And I would like to take about 15 minutes to provide you with some key figures and priorities of the 2024 budget. Last Wednesday, January 10th, city staff launched an operating budget, $17 billion in gross expenditure, comprised of rate-supported programs and tax-supported programs. The city capital budget in the 10-year planning horizon is about almost $50 billion. It's almost like a $50 million per year. This budget was informed by a number of key elements. Our long-term financial plan presented to council in September meeting, the pre-budget consultation with the public during November, with in person 16 sections, and also online survey with more than 10,000 response. The Ontario New Deal Gov announcement adopted by City Council in early December. The 2024 budget also includes some major investment with more than $150 million in transit, affordable housing, shelter, and public safety. City staff proposed a 9% residential property tax increases, equivalent to $321 per year, based on the average assess value. The economy of Toronto is the largest contributor to the Canadian economy. It represents 20% at the national GDP and is an important economic hub of the world. Toronto is a commercial, distribution, financial, and industrial center. Over the next decade, the city faced combined operating and capital fiscal pressure of $46.5 billion. Without serious attention from City Council to address, these pressures are very likely to threaten the city's fiscal stability and its ability to maintain the level of services that the people of Toronto currently have. When it comes to the challenges, so Toronto has a number of unique local issues. Just to name a few: growing economic inequality among residents, worsening housing crisis, difficult to get around within the city, aging infrastructures. But there are also external factors beyond the city jurisdiction: increased demand for services attributed to immigration, as well as refugee claimants, asylum seekers. High interest rate resulted in increased costs of borrowing, rising inflation, just to name a few. So now I'm going to get into more details about the operating budget for 2024. So as reflected in this slide, the city staff have prepared a 2024 combined tax and rate-supported operating budget totaling $17 billion in expenditures. We have known for quite some time that 2024 was going to be a very challenging budget year. In fact, when all the 2024 program budget submissions were collected from the division and also agency, the final opening operating budget pressures amounted to $1.776 billion. It is greater than what our initial estimate of $1.5 billion, like 9 months ago in 2023. Driving this change to our initial estimate was that significant added demand for shelter system. Especially it relates to the demand for refugee claimants response, as well as additional costs associated with the safety and service investment in our transit system. So to address the pressure with this magnitude, and also while aiming to protect and maintain the city services, we have taken a multi-year approach to this year budget. One of the key pressures that we are facing in 2024 beyond our regular traditional annual inflationary growth-related pressure structural deficit is the need to manage and transition costs to our property tax bases associated with the remaining $578 million sustained COVID impact costs, mainly in transit and shelter services. During the budget development, city staff factored both the $620 million in reductions and offsets, New Deal funding from the province, and 9% residential property tax increases in the 2024 budget. And while the budget primarily aims to maintain and preserve services, we have also made critical and new investment totaling $152 million in the area in the most valued by our residents. Through our pre-budget consultations, we heard from our residents that they would most support added investment in affordable housing, shelter services, transit services, and making Toronto safer. So in front of you, this pie chart or donut chart, it's just to illustrate the $17 billion comprised of tax support and rate support programs and dollar. This slide shows the total gross expenditure and also net budget for 2024, with the full length of the bar describing the total spend for 2024, and the yellow bars represent the amount of property tax funded dedicated to delivering these services. It also highlights in the lighter color that nearly $600 million in sustained COVID impacts in shelter and transit services. As reflected in this table, we continue to spend significant amount on the city's cost share programs, with a total spend of $4.75 billion in 2024. This includes programs which receive contributions from the other levels of government, such as Toronto Employment and Social Services, Toronto Public Health, Children's Services, Toronto Shelter Support Services, TCHC, long-term care homes, etc. I won't speak to all the categories, but I will quickly note that nearly $2.6 billion in spending for transit services, which is the next major spending category from the city. Next, our rate programs, including Toronto Water and Solid Waste, Toronto Parking Authority, reflecting 13% of our total investment. Then the police and police board budgets is about $1.35 billion in total spend. Financing, there is about $1.2 billion in capital financing support, with more than $900 million in debt servicing costs annually, and nearly $300 million in capital from current operating money to support the capital budget. I would also like to point out corporate accounts, which is just over $1 billion, includes expense incurred on behalf of the entire organization, such as insurance, employee-related benefits and liabilities. But similarly, under the corporate accounts, there's also recaptured corporate revenue, such as dividends, interest income, municipal land transfer tax, etc. That's why the budget reflects an overall net revenue in the graphic. Okay, so I would like to delve into a little bit more about the opening budget pressure of almost $1.8 billion, a bit more in here. You can see of the total pressures, 65% or about $1.15 billion is attributed to transit and shelter services, which includes $578 million sustained COVID impact, which I already mentioned, as well as additional regular base budget pressure from transit system enhancement. Each includes operation of Line 5 and Line 6 scheduled for launch in 2024 September. additional service enhancement announced in the fall 2023 last year, and a series of other base budget pressures. This also includes costs associated with the increased demand for our shelter services. This budget, 2024, will allow for a total of 10,600 shelter beds. Toronto has more shelter beds and more beds per capita than any Canadian cities. This includes approximately 4,800 beds expected to be used by refugee claimants in 2024 alone. So I would like to now take you through the approach that city staff have done, to mitigate and balance the budget, the pressure, and balance the budget to bring forward in front of you. To do so with the lens of the multi-year approach I have mentioned. So we are taking the following step. First, as always, as part of the regular annual budget process, city staff review budget submission, identify potential opportunities for offsets, efficiencies, and other revenue actions. So this year, these actions total $620 million in offset and reductions has been factored. This includes line-by-line program review. It could be salary related, it could be non-salary related. User fee adjustment, inflation rate, volume adjustment, and that will also help to offset this pressure. We also include $30 million in long-term financial plan actions, such as the graduated municipal land transfer tax for high-value homes. Second, it includes a multi-year bridging strategy, which are designed to be temporary measures to strategically manage the pressure we face over the next 3 years. This includes the full depletion of the remaining COVID backstop, $305 million, and other one-time balancing actions. Just keeping in mind that these one-time bridging strategy will need to be reversed in 2025 and 2026. Third, balancing actions factors the $382 million in provincial New Deal funding, mostly related to transit and shelter costs. Fourth, the 2024 budget incorporates $380 million in additional revenue generated from the property tax rate increase of 9%. And last, we are still expecting the federal commitment funding program to offset the city costs in terms of the refugee claimant response as part of this budget. Just to give you a little bit a chart to show what is the New Deal in terms of its budget implications in the operating. This is a very uplifting, credit definitely goes to the mayor, which will be able to secure the New Deal funding for operating and also capital, which we will be discussed later. So the New Deal includes, for 2024, includes $382 million in operating funding from the New Deal, including $75 million operating costs associated with the Eglinton Crosstown and Finch West LRT, $100 million in investment in subway and transit safety, recovery, sustainable operations, $200 million for base shelter and homelessness support. And last but not least is the $6.9 million in operating funding for the Gardiner Expressway, while the due diligence process is completed to upload it to the province. So in 2025 and 2026, we expect a total of $410 million and $445 million respectively, resulting in the New Deal operating funding arrangement for a total of $1.2 billion over the 3 years. This budget was heavily influenced by a series of public consultation, and here we are too. Initiated by the mayor and the budget chair, the city hosts a month-long engagement campaign, including an online survey and various pre-budget consultations in November for residents to participate in across the city. Okay, let me share with you some findings. Some of the key results from the pre-budget consultation was that we received overwhelming support for increased investment in affordable housing and shelter services. While with 37% of the participants expressing support for investment in those areas, we also heard support for increased investment in transit and police services for 13% and 10% of participants respectively. Alternatively, we also heard 43% of the participants that the city should decrease investment in police services. 13% also felt that we should decrease parking-related services. And lastly, 6% of participants felt that we should increase investment in both support for Toronto business and investment in arts and culture. And at the end, more than majority, 80% participants agree that province and the federal should pay their fair share of funding with us. As I previously mentioned, the city, this budget not only maintain and preserve existing service, and we are able to include additional spending of $152 million in new and enhanced services in the area, consistent with what we heard during the pre-budget consultation. Just to give you a few examples, $31 million of winter warming response plan, $35 million for 450 new dedicated shelter beds for refugee claimants, which contributes to an overall 10,600 shelter beds projected in 2024. $26 million to sustain the safety, security, and well-being program at the TTC, which ensures a safe, reliable service and responsive to customer needs. $17 million to increase direct nursing hours for residents at the city's long-term care homes, supported by the provincial funding. An investment of $2.5 million for Toronto Public Library's open hours implementation plan, which will add additional hours throughout the week and also increase expanding Sunday services to a number of branches. $13 million to expand the Toronto Community Crisis Services to be 24/7 citywide. And consistent from the past multi-year hiring plan, this budget will add another 52 firefighters and 62 paramedics. I already mentioned that this budget also addressed and managed the permanent transition of $578 million sustained COVID impact to the city property tax base. So altogether, this new and base budget investment result in enhanced funding in shelters, housing, transit, and public safety. These are all key areas we heard support for during the budget consultations. This budget incorporates a residential property tax rate increase of 9%, which is about $321 for average home with an assess value just under $700,000. Okay. So the budget also reflects an increase of 4.5% for which is half of the increases for multi-residential properties and also commercial properties as well. This is consistent with the past council adopted property tax increase policy. Keeping in mind, the city also continues to maintain property tax relief program, including tax increase deferral program and also tax increase cancellation programs for eligible residents in Toronto. So in 2023, up to last year, these two programs benefit over 8,600 households since 2015 and has provided $36 million in property tax relief. Okay, now I'm moving on to the next section, which is our 10-year capital plan. Okay. 10-year capital plan, $50 billion. And for 2024, it's about $4.6 billion. Okay, the 10-year capital plan is balanced while maximizing the use of the non-debt financing strategies. We anticipate new intergovernmental funding as reflected in the New Deal I will discuss later. We continue to leverage growth-related funding tools for eligible growth-related projects like development charges. And this 10-year capital plan maintains our debt service ratio under 15% of all years within our 10-year planning horizon. City Building Fund plays an important role, which was introduced since 2017, starting at 0.5%. This capital budget right now includes a 1.5 increases for the City Building Fund levy, which will be leveraged to support critical investment in transit and housing. Like previous year, this year budget continues to enhance our climate focus as well in the capital planning process. Last but not least, this 10-year plan continues to prioritize investment in critical state of good repair, with 52% of our spending for 2024, which is equivalent to $26 billion dedicated to state of good repair investment. So when compared to the last year budget process, the 10-year plan, this represents an increase of $1.8 billion. Similarly, our 10-year capital plan also includes rate supported program and tax supported program. And as you can see in the chart, our tax supported programs is about 64% for $32 million. And then the rest, which is the rate supported programs, including Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and Toronto Parking Authority, $17.8 billion or 36%. So how do we fund our 10-year capital plan? Okay, so the capital funding, you can see the first one is from Toronto Water rate revenue, totaling $14.6 billion. $14.6 billion. So traditional, tax-supported debt funding totals is about $6.6 billion. While we are seeing increased debt servicing costs with higher interest rate, we do benefit, the city do benefit from the use of the green bond and social bonds while ensuring that our debt servicing costs remain under 15% in each year of the plan. The City Building Fund, $5.5 billion or represent 11% of the total capital investment. We also have $2 billion funded through recoverable debt, which will be surfaced through additional future stream of revenue generated from the capital investment. Moving down the chart, development charge, funding $5.7 billion, representing 11%. Reserve funds, city reserve fund, excluding draws from water, development charge, and city building fund, that is about $3.8 billion in capital funding. And further, there is a $3.6 billion in capital from current funding, which is budget in operating. Okay. This 10-year capital plan also includes full provincial funding for the capital costs associated with the Gardiner and DVP upload of $1.9 billion, while the province due diligence process is still underway. In terms of where do we spend if the 10-year capital plan, you can see that over $16 billion or 29% of our capital plan is directed to Toronto water and wastewater infrastructure and stormwater investment. The next city highest investment of taxpayer funding is in transit. It's about $13 billion. This represents 24% of our 10-year capital plan. The city is also committed to spending $3.2 billion in housing, coupled with $35.3 billion in foregone revenues in the form of $2.3 billion in land contributions and $3 billion in city direct incentives. We are making key investment in the city housing TO plan. Specifically, this plan includes $567 million in funding to support the delivery of 4,455 new rent control units as part of the city's goal to have the 65,000 new homes by 2030. We are also investing a further $5.7 billion in transportation and mobility through investment in road, bridge repair, in safety and cycling infrastructure. Okay. So this is the new in front of you. This is the New Deal impact in terms of on our 10-year capital plan. In total, the city expects over $3 billion in capital funding or relief over the next 10 years. This mainly includes the uploading of the Gardiner Expressway and Don Valley Parkway, currently budgeted at a value of $1.9 billion. The province also has committed to providing the city with $758 million in funding for the purchase of 55 new subway trains to replace those currently in use on Line 2. Of course, these funds are conditional on the matching federal support, and we are not currently budgeted included in the TTC's 10-year capital plan yet. The New Deal also, one more thing is the New Deal also confirmed $342 million in additional funding through the Building Faster Fund based on the Toronto exceeding annual housing targets. When it comes to the City Building Fund, 1.5% this year, which represent an annual increase of approximately $53 for the average home. In 2024, with this as I mentioned, we have City Building Fund since 2017. This City Building Fund is expected to generate cumulatively $350 million in revenue for 2024. Today, we have made almost like $1 billion in investment, due to the City Building Fund. And we will continue to support an additional $5.5 billion in capital investment over the 10-year plan. State of good repair continues to be the key priority for the city. It reflects, as I mentioned, reflects $26 billion or 52% of all our planned capital spending over the next 10 years. This investment represents an increase of $1.8 billion or 7% as compared to the last year. The city investment is investing a total of $1.6 billion towards the SOGR for TCHC building repair, which is an example, which will provide ongoing capital funding to maintain existing TCHC housing stock in a state of good repair. In addition, as part of the budget process, this 10-year plan includes an added investment of almost $200 million for parks, forestry, and recreation to address the critical state of good repair work in order to mitigate service disruption and prevent unplanned facility closures. Give you some example, critical priority SOGR projects include St. Lawrence Community Center, Scarborough Gardens Arena, George Bell Arena facility. Even with added investment, the city's state of good repair backlog is expected to grow from $10.6 billion at the end of 2023 to $22.7 billion in 2033. This has been driven by significant cost escalation, in part due to the high inflation and recent supply issues. Update building condition assessment of all our infrastructure assets on an ongoing basis. And a lot of aging infrastructures are nearing the end of its useful life. So this page is the summary page and also the highlight page. Again, this year budget, $17 billion, maintain the core services and services level, while the city is still able to make significant and key investments in transit, shelters, and community safety. And this 10-year plan, capital plan, almost $50 billion, continues to prioritize investment in state of good repair while making advancement in transit and housing. Okay. So, to wrap up, I just want to, in front of you is the budget schedule, the end-to-end budget process for the City of Toronto. And I would like to, to mention a few key days for everyone here. So this week, tomorrow, January 16 to 18, the budget committee members and also budget chair, will conduct extensive program agency review with more deep dive understanding of the budget for each of the program and agency over the next 3 days. And then also in the same evening, on January 16 to 18, there will be a telephone town halls, which is the new element, new process, and another public engagement as part of that budget process. On January 22nd and 23rd, there will also be another opportunity for the public to participate through the deputations to budget committee. And then on January 26th, that will be after the budget committee will do the wrap up. And then after reviewing the budget materials and also doing all the questions with the program and agency. So the budget there will be a special council meeting on a schedule for February 14 to discuss the budget following the mayor's release on her proposed budget by February 1st. So this is further information. We really encourage people to get involved in the budget process. There are still opportunities to hear feedback and input from residents and business. So you can go to the website, the City of Toronto budget website, to find out the details. You can look up the town hall phone number. It is available in the budget website. You can also write, an email, share your feedbacks and concerns, and then submit your comments directly to the budget committees too at buc@toronto.ca. And always you can last but not least is to contact your local city councilor. Okay, so that concludes my presentation, and thank you so much for the public here, and Councillor Chan, and support from the mayor and also the budget chair. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Let's all give him a round of applause for sharing this cold winter night with us. If you can just stop sharing. Before we continue, I have one little request, and that is, could we aim for a Brady Bunch moment, like a photo of people who are here at the town hall? Just you can point at somebody, but yeah, if you could unhide your camera, and we're just gonna take a family photo of people in Willowdale working together to discuss the budget. And then after our Brady Bunch moment, we will continue with our town hall. So, okay, let's do this. So there's 4 screens, so I'm going to do this 4 times. So you won't know when you're up, so just keep smiling, okay? I'm going to point. Oh, I'm going to point to Anthony here. Hold on. That didn't work. Hold on. Okay.
We're all pointing to Anthony then.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to do it again. 3, 2, 1. Amazing. Amazing. You guys all look great. Very smart looking group of people. And I respect everyone's right to keep your camera off, but everyone who was camera on, you are in our Brady Bunch photo. So thank you for that. So next we have our budget chief, who has been, and I've been on some of these briefings, and really they have been challenging departments about tightening things up, looking at how the budgets are. And so our budget chief, Councillor Carroll, can share a little bit more about the process and maybe some information that can help us chew on this very big budget. So everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Councillor Carroll, and I'm just going to pin you there. There we go.
Okay, sure. Thanks so much, Lily. And I want to start by thanking Lily, because in taking part in the budget committee, it's hard in your very first year to put your hand up to be on the budget committee. I know, because I did it. It's a lot of work, because you're adjusting to the format, getting used to it. You're having to take on board years of history financially, and you're going line by line every time you sit down with the divisions. Lily took part in something that I want to highlight tonight, because there have been a lot of questions and emails from people saying, you haven't even looked at the books. That's why there's a property tax increase. In fact, that's never the case in the city budget. I'm looking at some of the people on the screen. Some are my age, and so you remember all the way back to amalgamation, and people generally do remember that we didn't quite get that right. That we were told it was all going to be cost neutral, and then it wasn't. So the North York that we know kind of started to fray around the edges. The North York that we had was not there, and a lot of that is because of a financial structural deficit. There was that big attempt to figure out who does what, and we didn't quite get it right. And so, and in a lot of cases, the city ended up doing far too much with property tax, and not getting quite enough when they partner and share with the other orders of government. That's pretty well known. But even if you didn't know it, or you're one of the younger people on tonight, you would know it because you've been hearing it really from all of the previous city managers. It's not just our current city manager, Paul Johnson, or our current CFO, but all of the city managers and CFOs for about the last 4 of them before retiring have said, this will not stand. We can't continue to be amongst GTA municipalities the one with the lowest tax rate, but the most responsibilities and the most demand on services, and still rely on property tax alone. So that's a structural thing that has been known for a long time. But the 3 years of the pandemic really accelerated the process of getting us to the brink. One of the questions tonight, and one we can get into more in the answers, is someone said, how can it be that you're cutting and yet there's a property tax increase? Well, every single year begins with a process of the divisions themselves going line by line to try and meet the CFO's request is always, can you bring me a flatline budget? Can you absorb the impacts of inflation on your department? And can you find any efficiencies? Because even to flatline, if I give you the same amount of money as you had last year, but people get a cost of living increase, and there's inflationary impacts like on fuel, or if you're in a division that serves food, those sorts of things, to flatline means you're having to cut something. And that happens every year. Every year, first the divisions try and find as many efficiencies as possible, and then they bring their budgets in to Anthony is our senior financial planner. So he runs a team in finance that the first thing is they review all of the staff budgets. And there's a lot of back and forth that goes on there where they say, you haven't gone far enough. This isn't even ready for me to show to the chair of budget or the budget committee. You got some work to do here. And that happened a lot this year because we needed a lot of efficiencies to go as far as we could using efficiencies to reduce that $1.8 billion gap. But we needed to fill that gap before we even start to look at how will we serve you next year and what will be the economic pressures of the next year. And so there were significant reductions were made, but then we still have to build in the cost of serving you for the following year. And so that's why you see a tension between cutting and investing. At the same time, we went out of our way to ask residents, what do you want? Where are we lacking in investment? What isn't working that well? Where do you need to see us make more investment? And everyone at the 16 different public events we had, or the online surveys we did, had some ideas about where they'd like things to be better. When we said, in order to be able to invest in the things that need to improve, are there places that you would decrease? That's much harder. It's much harder. Most of us are not selfish. We know that there are services, well, we don't use them, someone else does. And so that was a harder question for most to answer. And so we took that feedback. We also took the efficiency review that staff had done. And then we took the impacts of the provincial New Deal. Wonderful, very welcome stuff. But a lot of it is very much strings attached. The province wanted to see an investment in your transit system. We want you to have a more safe and reliable system, and so do they. There's no point in building new lines as they're proposing for us if riders abandon the transit that exists today. So that went under the list of things that needed to be invested in with the money from the New Deal. And to their credit, the province is also helping us in our shelter system right now. Some of the new monies that they brought us are helping us with the extreme state of homelessness that we have right now in our city and really all major cities. But when we get into the conversation tonight in the Q&A, you can get into the specifics of parts of the budget that are hard for you, particularly the increase. I'm happy to talk to it, and I want people to know I take this seriously. You know, I have two daughters in their 30s. One has special needs. She needs a compassionate city. The other is a single mom with 3 kids headed towards their post-secondary. I want them to be able to live in the city, and I got to pay my property tax bill too. So, you know, I go through the budget taking it personally. I'm sure, you know, Lily does the same. That's one of the reasons why that rule that says your public representative has to live in the city It's so that we're going through this together. And it really matters to me that you're struggling when you're struggling. But I have not ever forgotten what someone said. It was about the fourth of these pre-budget consultations we had. And one of the people at one of the tables said, don't cut any services. When things are difficult everywhere else, I really need the city to keep delivering for me. I really need that to keep happening. And I thought, you know, he's right. And he's not just speaking for himself. He's speaking for all Torontonians, young and old, haves and have-nots. You want to be able to rely on a service that you've relied on for so many years. And so that's why we tried to avoid frontline services. I think tonight we'll probably get into a particular service that was invented in North York. And that's about the only really frontline one that was in the budget launch. But it's important that you talk about them tonight because we have to give our very best advice to the mayor at the end of this month so that when she launches, she can take that into account when she launches what will be the final budget that Lily and I both have to vote on. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Lily. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Lily.
Thank you. I think I would have learned post-COVID. Not yet, apparently. Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Carroll. I really appreciate you being with us tonight. I know that you have been working long hours and have many hours ahead of you. So taking time to be with our community, we're super grateful for that. And I know a lot of you are worried about the impact, and we feel that pressure for sure. And I just want to say that, you know, as your counselor and as a member of the budget committee, I think the overwhelming response that we have is that we want to listen. That's why there's town halls, and that's why there is this journey between this moment in time and the budget being voted in on the 14th. So there is a journey that we can share together and ways that you can get involved. You know, showing up tonight is already like amazing. So that's, you know, being educated about what it is we're grappling with, that's really helpful. I've also created a Willowdale budget survey, and I think I can share it in the link. I'll share it in a bit, but please fill out the survey. You know, that's another opportunity for you to share your comments, concerns, and it helps me just collect more data about the voices of our community. And there is next week an opportunity to make a deputation. So historically, I think, you know, the suburbs are known as sleepy suburbs, but really making deputations is an important part of democracy. I would encourage you to sign up. You have to sign up by, I think, 5 o'clock or 4:30 on the 19th, and then you can make a deputation at North York Civic Center next Tuesday night on the 23rd, I believe it is. And there's like an afternoon session and an evening session. And during those times, Councillor Carroll will be there, I'll be there, as well as another member of the budget committee. And our only job that night is to listen. So please sign up to make a deputation. If there's an idea that you have to share or something you're really passionate, you know, in support or in criticism of the budget. We want to hear both sides, and we don't want to, you know, we're not trying to bias the process. This is democracy, and part of democracy, actually a very important part of democracy, is participating. So with regard to the budget, I think, you know, I have new lens as a new counselor, and one thing that really struck me in this learning journey has been the term structural deficit. So, and I think FIFA is a great example of how that structural deficit impacts us. So FIFA is coming, if you're a soccer fan, woohoo! But the city is paying a third of the cost to host FIFA. We have to pay for a training center. there's infrastructure costs, and the federal government and the provincial government will also be pitching in. That sounds great, but all that amazing revenue from tourism and hotels, the city only gets a tiny little hotel tax that comes back to us. So the income tax that increases, the sales tax that increases, it doesn't come back to the very people who are literally hosting FIFA. And so that just kind of illustrates one of the structural deficit pieces, which is that our budget does not grow with our economy. So we try to support people in the city to be successful business owners, but when they are successful, it actually doesn't come back to our budget, and that is unfortunate. So um, I I've looked at some of the fiscal frameworks of cities around the world, and cities of our size usually have much more diverse revenue streams, which usually include some attachment to the economy through a sales tax piece or an income tax or both. So New York, Belgium, Madrid, just famous cities around the world generally do not only rely on property tax. And the other thing that is really challenging is we see a lot of things continually being downloaded to us. So even while we've negotiated a new deal with the province, but most recently, childcare. So childcare is federal and a flow through. We have the $10 deal per day piece that's come from the federal government, but then it's also then a flow through the provincial government. And previously, the province funded our administrative costs for daycare, and now they're cutting that in half. We're going to be cost sharing administration of daycare, while administering daycare has become more complicated because of the pieces from the federal and the provincial government. So that's an example where costs are being downloaded to us, and when they download it, it's kind of quiet. Nobody really knows that these are being downloaded, and they don't download a stable funding source. So they're not saying here is a responsibility and here is some stable funding to make sure that you can cover that cost. So this is a really big problem. And if you look at our budget, hundreds upon hundreds of pages, which, you know, it's been my midnight reading of late, you will see there are things that have been downloaded and downloaded. And when property taxes were invented, back in the day, it was roads and sidewalks, the simple things that make a city function. But Toronto especially, but actually municipalities across Canada are far more complex now, have to deal with the unhoused. It's a growing problem, not just here in Toronto, but in small cities across Canada are dealing with that as well. So we have increasingly complex cities that don't have the revenue tools to solve the problems that they have to deal with. And I'll just end with a great quote attributed to Hazel McCallion, which Councillor Perks mentioned at council last month, which is the federal government has all the power, the province has all the money, and the municipalities have all the problems. And so here we are, we have a lot of problems, and our budget is trying to very hard to solve problems for our communities. So that is where the heavy lifting is. We are heavy lifting to solve problems, and it's not an easy task. And really, the long-term conversation, independent of trying to work this budget out, is we need a new fiscal framework for municipalities in Canada. We cannot every year have to wrestle down our higher levels of government to try to get the money to not thrive, but survive. This budget is still about surviving. It's not about thriving. Thriving would be addressing our state of good repair backlog in a much bigger and meaningful way than what is being proposed, although it is already more ambitious than previous budgets. So that is my little piece. It's been a lot that we are learning together, but again, I'm committed to listening to your feedback, and the notes are all available online, so you too can dive in and take a look at every department, where they found efficiencies, where they're challenged, and in every budget note, you will see unmet capital needs. So this budget doesn't solve every problem that the city has. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now, we already have some questions that have come in, and I'm gonna just go to a list that I have here. I think I'm gonna start with a question from Vic Lapreti, who's been very active in our chat. And Vic has asked, what are these efficiencies? Can we know what is being achieved? In many organizations, both public and private, when you're facing a potential deficit, you look at departmental budget reductions. It is quite common to ask for 10% budget reductions rather than tax increases. So I think what Vic would like to understand is, what kind of efficiencies have been found? Can more efficiencies be found? What has been on the chopping block?
Ooh.
Yes,
If I can, if I
yes,
can
yes.
jump in there, Lily, that list will be sort of unfolding this week in our 3 days of budget committee meetings. It's customary by the end of it, through briefing notes and such, if you haven't already found them in the analyst notes yourself, then we ask for the efficiencies. But this is an extraordinary year, and a lot of efficiencies were taken in each department. And so I've asked Stephen to start working on a list so we can print it out and put it out there. But it's a list of things. The reason we say efficiencies and cost avoidances is because people will say, well, where are the layoffs? You haven't laid anybody off. Well, we have an organization that's still pretty full of baby boomers. And so a big part of it is delaying hiring. And this is not frontline. The analogy I used earlier today, I was explaining this to students. At the middle management layer, the upper middle management layer, we ask the departments when someone is exiting, and that is always happening, that you do a review and look at whether or not you need to replace that person this year. And so a lot of separations and retirements will happen, but the hiring will be delayed. Because what happens when you do that, we find that if they reorganize to do that, they often find, hey, we functioned without that person. We organized job descriptions, and the department is still delivering what it needs to deliver. And so that position can be removed from the books. It's not a matter of delaying that hiring. Maybe we don't need that person anymore. And so we find that when we put that pressure on them not to hire until after they've come in and got approval from the senior leadership team, city manager and the deputy city managers, that you can save tens of millions of dollars right there. So there's a lot of that going on to between 30 and 50 million. Because that happens across all departments and even agencies. We're asking the same thing up in the upper management levels of even things like the TTC and the police. You need your police on the ground, but do you need all the folks in the office? And so we've asked them to use those types of measures. We're also looking at things like, do we have to have this delivered by city staff in operating? Are these the kinds of projects that are really state of good repair? We just have operating folks doing them. If we bundle up some of the smaller repairs and say capital's going to do it, can we do it? But we'll strategically time it so we save that money for another year, and then do all of those repairs together, and then be able to do them for a lower cost. And so there's a lot of that going on. And there's also a lot of negotiating. We have a number of divisions that use fuel. And so we're rationalizing how they get their fuel, the same kind of bulk and futures buying that goes on in the TTC. that can be done across fleets. And so all of those measures are being looked at. But the other thing is that the extras that people often say, oh, you've got a whole bunch of extras there. Who's traveling, who's got magazine subscriptions in their office, all these trade magazines, do you need them? All of those little sort of inner office things, those have all been trimmed really over the past few years. And while you trim them, they sometimes find their way back into the office. And they were told this year, scour the office. Any extra in the office has to go. We're even now reducing the cost of operating the departments simply by reducing the amount of space they use to operate in. So we have a thing called the Master Accommodation Plan that is taking a good hard look at who's coming to work, back to work 5 days a week, who's functioning from home. And if that's the case, can they work in smaller shared office places so that we can reduce the cost of some of our leased premises? Some of the work we do isn't in a building owned by the city, but in offices that we lease. So we're reducing the amount of money we spend on leases. And all of those are the operating costs, the costs on the side of the day-to-day delivery of service. And so if you can trim as many of those as possible, great. But as you can probably guess, the biggest piece there is trying to save the front lines. Because while, a manager retiring who was working on a special project can go, and we might go months without him, or maybe not even bring him. But someone retiring who is the guy who drives around to all the parks on Monday morning in a truck to see what kind of mess was left behind by the weekend. When he retires, we need somebody by the next Monday morning. And so that's what we mean when we say protecting those frontline services and doing as much as we can in the administration of the organization. Only thing that's important to keep in mind there, when you see the efficiencies, you'll find it doesn't span across every single department, because we have a challenge in places where we deliver a service for the other orders of government, things like childcare, things like the way we deliver long-term care. A lot of the bigger costs there, the per bed revenue that comes in from residents who simply hand in their CPP. Anything, the top up there comes from the province. There's not a lot we can reduce there, because in a cost shared service, most of the money is in other governments. It's not coming from your property taxes. So when we introduce that list of efficiencies later this week, I won't be online with you. So promise me this: when you look at it and you think, oh, here's a whole department and no reductions, think about whether or not you heard tonight that that's a cost shared service, because in those, we can't save you a lot of property taxes. Paramedics, we're 100 million of it, but there's another 400 million in the paramedics and the supplies that comes from other orders of government. So I can't change your property tax bill by doing anything in that shared space.
So actually, on that
we'll
note,
get that list out to you.
There was a question from someone about the 112 million for paramedics, and why couldn't that be covered by provincial, since it is a health related service?
Well, I'll tell you what we do cover in ours. Most of that is covering the cost of the technologies they need, keeping a vehicle reserve for them, and then running the administration of managing those employees. So we agree to administrate and run a department. And then the harder part of that service comes via the provincial cost share. And if you think about it, that in a way, that's an area of savings that we made years ago. As technology started to take over first responders, we saw that the I&T bill in each one of those getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we're also paying for the 911 center itself. And so keeping that inside the city structure meant that it's us who goes out, and we went through the work over the last decade of getting them all onto a shared radio system so that 911 operates a little more efficiently. we get the best deal through an economy of scope of bringing them together. And then lastly, found that once you bring the tech together, they could literally be in the same building. So we got rid of the turf war, and you'll see that now when we have to renew and rebuild a fire station, it's a fire station and ambulance station in one place. We get a lot of economy out of that shared space.
I'm going to
Yeah.
keep moving through because there's a lot of questions, as you can know.
Yeah.
So Vicky Sanderson would like to know, new refugee beds, does that mean an increase in space and assets or changes to current spacing in existing shelters?
Vicky, hello, first of all. Vicky goes all the we go all the way back to the old North York Parents Assembly, but you were much younger than me even then. So the refugee issue, thank you so much for asking this question. When we say they are overwhelming our shelter system, we mean as it stands. And think about it, you all know, because there have been some facilities here, Long Yonge Street. During COVID, when every shelter inhabitant had to spread out, we had to lease and open a number of hotels to the shelter system. We found operators like Fred Victor and Homes First and people like that to help us run them. But we had to spread people out. And so we were using hotels. At one point, we were using 28 hotels spread across the three big suburbs. And then when COVID was over, we could move people back into the regular shelter space because the guidelines of keeping everybody so far apart were relaxed. People could now share a room again. However, during that time, that was when we started to see, first of all, doesn't get a lot of lip service because we have the refugee issue with the federal government, but we are still facing a lot of very, very dangerous health issues due to the toxic drug supply. And so that makes up a lot of the homeless population. So we have to serve them. But with the influx of asylum seekers, they are the reason why today we are still operating 17 hotels. You would think that by moving the homeless population back into the shelters we operated before COVID, close all those hotels now. The influx of refugees have meant that we still are spread out. And those 17 hotels, many of them are not good spaces to be shelters. The ideal shelter should be 100 people or fewer. 60 to 80 is ideal. So you wander some of the smaller ones. Some of you may be familiar or volunteer at one that opened in my ward next door on McNichol Avenue, Placer Court. That's an ideal shelter space. It was built for that purpose, or renovated, I should say, for that purpose from an old office building. And there are 70 people in it, and it's safe, runs well, and they're able in those small amounts to do the kind of case management that gets people on their way, help them get the housing, help them get homes. Currently, we are seeing asylum seekers arrive at such a fast pace that we're unable to do the case management. We're just focused on where will they sleep tonight? How will we feed them? Where can they go? Oops, crowded here. Where can we put this person that's appropriate and they'll be in a safe population group? We're just surviving. But we're using the spaces that we had before COVID and those 17 hotels. And that's not ideal. That's part of what we could remedy if the federal government steps up to their responsibility. Because we really think that new people coming to Canada, being let through the airport and directed onto our intake center, that's a result of federal policy, federal actions, and we're asking for federal help.
The next question, and Nathan, I see your hand up, but I'm just going to do a few more of the chat ones and then we'll get to you. So Mahadavan is asking, the assessed value of average home is almost $1 million plus. Why are we using such a small figure? It's very misleading. I think she's
well, as you know, we're using the average because, as you know, increasingly the percentage of people who own the home that they live in are condo dwellers, and so that does skew the average. Admittedly it does. And so when we use the average, we're using what is a very modest home in Scarborough, if it's a home on the ground, or the average price of a home, which if you include the entire condominium population, they're very much ratepayers and very much affected by this, because we've heard, you know, since releasing this, and it was a, you know, a night of a tortured soul for me too, thinking about it, because if you think about it, you know, everyone's really worried about young first-time owners and how the how finances affect them, and everybody's worried about seniors. And I just described the bulk of the population in condominiums, and so we use the average because we want to make sure that people understand we're incorporating them in how we look at the average, because we understand the impact that it has on them, and they make up so much of Toronto's population now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Natalie is asking, why aren't efficiencies being implemented for freezing the number of city staff or cut instead of cutting the police budget and putting our safety at risk again? So I think you kind
Well,
of
first of
answered
all,
that.
we are not cutting the
Yeah.
police budget.
Right.
I want to remove that rumor right now. The police want a budget that adds 408 positions to the city right now. They want to add 100 new civilian staff and 308 new officers. That's what the document that's on the city's website says right now. All we are saying is that we went as far as we could. You know, we could give you 25 million new dollars. We could add officers, but what we're saying is we ran out of money, 12 million short of what you're asking for, and what that is the equivalent of is about 100. And we leave it to them to decide whether that's civilians or uniform officers. But the average starting cost of an officer, benefits and everything all in, is 120. So it's easy to do the math when we're saying we're $12 million apart. Just worked out that way. But we are looking at an amount of money that the city can offer that does give them an increased complement, that does make the city safer. And quite frankly, later this same year, 2024, the Toronto Police Association will be coming to the bargaining table for however many officers they have. And so there's tremendous financial pressure. Your own local councillor tried to help her sister on the police board to say to them, if we're going to increase your complement, can we see a strategic plan, kind of like the fire services and the paramedics have done? Could we see a strategic plan so that we can improve you over a few years? And that was discouraged. I watched Lily speak very well, and Councillor Amber Morley speak very well to doing exactly that, so that we could strategically improve things. And I watched members of the senior command discourage being that strategic. They spoke against, and so members of the board voted against doing a strategic plan. But honestly, we're going to have to require one. We all want safety, and there are lots of safety measures in this budget, police ones and non-police ones. There are lots of ways to get to safety, but we need to be really thoughtful and methodical about, if we're going to increase their complement, how we do it, and do it in a way that we can afford. Because as you can see, we've stretched your affordability as far as it will go in this proposal.
Mm-hmm. What relief will council, this is a question from Star, what relief will council be offering seniors who will have to sell their homes because they can't afford to live in them?
Oh, I beg of people to please take a look at the seniors programs we have. If you need to defer your property tax increase, most municipalities, and I checked to make sure that this hadn't changed somehow. Most of the surrounding GTA municipalities, the way they decide who is eligible for their property tax hardship funds are by looking at if you are a person who survives on only CPP and OAS. Some of them are only if you are a person who qualifies for GIS, which means low income senior of $21,000 a year. Pardon me. We have the highest in the GTHA. If your income is 55,000, the total household income is 55,000 or lower, then call us right away, because you can defer this increase. And that, by taking it up to 55,000, we are taking it to a point where a person could have CPP, OAS, and also a modest, pension from their employment, and they could still be under that bar. In which case, we do want to help you, as Anthony Ying outlined earlier. We've done that for a number of years now, to make sure that that people have that option if they're in that bracket. But beyond 55, if your income is over 55, I know it's hard. But there we get into equity issues, because there are people who are employed people, who have various impacts of various parts of the economy. And at a certain point, we have to be able to say, that people are all doing their fair share.
Okay. The next question is, sorry, I lost this. Actually, let's go to Nathan, whose hand is up. Nathan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Councillor Cheng. I guess my question is, it's twofold. I guess with respect to a structural deficit the city is facing, one of the things I've noticed is the city has adopted a lot of climate policies, such as the credit offset policy. In terms of tower-wise, in your activity note, it shows that you're going to renew that program, and a lot of that money flows through single source procurement from between the Toronto Atmospheric Fund and your TCHC. And that creates a structural issue because a lot of expenditures are being used to retrofit buildings and whatnot, and the climate policy was entrenched into your municipal code. I don't remember being consulted on these structural changes. The Toronto Green Standard, a bunch of different regulation. A lot of what I'm seeing here is a lot of costly regulation that's being used to, do our fair share in terms of climate change. But at the same time, it creates a structural operating deficit, which we are not resourced to pay for at this level order of government. And if the climate change policies are federal, I don't quite understand why we're paying it. And the second question is just in response to Councillor Carroll's property tax increase cancellation policy. I'm very concerned about the seniors in my neighborhood who live in houses. The actual, if you read the policy, I put it in the chat, it only applies to houses under 975,000. It's not completely income based. So even if your income is 55,000, but your house is under 975,000, you don't qualify. So, on average, our houses in our neighborhood are 1.5, 1.6 million. And my neighbor, Betty, who's 96, has lived in her home in her entire life. Her husband, Bob, just died last year, and there's no way that she would be able to afford a 10% increase. So, I'm a bit concerned here that, on the one hand, we're trying to build an age-friendly city and having seniors age in place. And at the same time, it's like, tough luck. There are other people unemployed. Everyone's paying their fair share. But, if there is a cancellation policy that was designed to make sure seniors aren't pushed in their home, those individuals shouldn't be pushed out of their homes just because, a 10% increase. So that's just my questions. And with one's respect to, I guess, the structural issue with respect to the offset policy, when was that put into place? Like, why was a cap and trade system put in place at the municipal level? Like, why weren't we consulted? And the second question is what's related to seniors. Like, how does the cancellation, why is the cancellation program capped at 975,000 underneath Willowdale's housing value? So no one in Willowdale, at least in houses, would qualify. Thank you.
Well, there are some exceptions to that. Anthony might be able to explain it in detail, but I would just say that Betty sounds like the exact kind of person who wants to reach out to the city this year. Because when your circumstances have changed like that, you really want to talk to somebody about what your true income is and your true assessed value is, et cetera, et cetera. Because you know how sometimes assessed values are actually written as lower than what your market value is. Anthony can probably expand on that, but Betty should reach out to us this year if her circumstances just change like that. Yeah.
And then I also want to add to that, besides the City of Toronto offers a cancellation program, but there's also another program called Property Tax Increase Deferral Program. This deferral program,
Right.
With the same household income threshold, I mean, last year is 55,000. I just want to let everybody know for 2024, we adjust the CPI. So the threshold is going to be 57,200. So hopefully it will be more eligible households. Combined income less than this will be eligible. So there is a deferral program which does not tie into your residential assets value of your home. So that is another option in here.
And if I can just go back, Lily, to something that Nathan worked out, is to me an example of the kinds of extraordinary things that the city does to save us money. Nathan mentioned a program between the Toronto Atmospheric Fund, something that costs taxpayers $0 year after year after year, but brings millions of savings. And I don't think that Mayor Chow will mind me giving a shout out, because that fund that has done so much to save what the city spends on energy costs and such was originally designed by a couple of councillors, one of whom was a young guy named Jack Layton. And that started a long time ago, and it is a tiny little workout horse that does work. The reason they are partnering with TCHC is TCHC desperately needed to not only renew some of the appliances in social housing, do some of the building retrofits to save energy costs. If you're changing a leaky roof on top of a housing project, why would you not also look at, is this building ideal for a heat pump? Could we drastically reduce what we're spending on utilities in this housing where the residents themselves don't pay all of the utility bills? Anywhere that that's possible, TAF is working with TCHC to help them see if that's possible. And then they have a financing vehicle that comes out of the Toronto Atmospheric Fund endowment and does that work. They do that work so successfully that what started out as the tiny little fund of Toronto's, we sold a landfill north of the city long before I was a councillor even. Back in the 80s, they sold a landfill, and some of it went to balancing the budget. And those two young men said, can we just have a little endowment of 23 million, and we'll go over here and we'll see if actually addressing climate change could save the city money. And that's exactly what it has done. At last count, we save about $65 million a year in utility expenses and energy expenses across the city because of things that have been either directly financed or piloted and then implemented through Toronto Atmospheric Fund partnerships. So there are all those are the kinds of efficiencies that, because they're not, this year we cut this and therefore we save money, that they go unsung, but in fact save you money every day. And we sometimes talk about you have to spend money to make money, but when it's the Atmospheric Fund doing it, they are a separate arm's length organization using their own endowment that now has a provincial amount and a federal amount, and they do 23 million has now become $100 million fund. They do stuff that never shows up on your property tax bill. Yeah.
So it's 9 o'clock. I want to do a time check. Are we good to maybe take 3 more questions? Is that okay, Shelley? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So Paul Roger is asking, public health has been low on funding. They have taken the most dramatic loss, 93 million in COVID funding that is lost. Why not transfer lost money into public health to pay for gaps in service? Where did the millions go?
Well, here's the thing about we're very fortunate. A few years ago, public health, they went from the current sitting government. Some of you may remember, we used to get 75 cents on the dollar, and then there was an announcement when the current sitting government first went into office. Yeah, we're not going to pay for public health anymore. It was a mass panic because they just really didn't understand what public health does and what the cost avoidance is of keeping people healthy. And it took them a while to figure it out, and then they did. And thank goodness, because that all got worked out midway through 2019. and there we were in 2020, where everything was all about public health, both the Ontario Medical Officer of Health and the Toronto Medical Officer of Health. But because of that, they have been helping in public health. And so for a lot of the COVID years, they were putting in additional to make sure that we were doing the vaccination program. But we found that they didn't really understand that for this to work in a dense city like Toronto, we had to do so much more than they were needing to do in other cities. A city like Toronto, we actually ourselves worked it out with them, and we funded partly with property tax money being enhanced into the budget, and others. We actually, some of you will remember, we sent ambassadors out. We gave grants to organizations that could help us find those people that would do it. And they literally went and knocked on doors and got people out to be vaccinated. Mm-hmm. We had one of the most successful vaccination rates and one of the lowest death rates as a result. That was money we felt well spent. But because it was so tied to those COVID expenses, that's the kind of thing that you sometimes have to balloon up into the budget to get something done, but it doesn't have to stay there. What is good news is that any funds left hanging around in departments or carried forward by departments that was a COVID expense, we have, in order to have a good partnership with both governments, said, you're not going to have us coming to you saying, hey, you left a bill behind for COVID. One of the reasons that you see balancing strategies in that slide that Anthony showed you of how we balance the budget is we're depleting the reserve that we had for helping us to carry COVID expenses, and COVID is now off the books. It's not sitting there in each department with a line item saying outstanding COVID expenses carried year after year after year. We've gone ahead and I like to say we've trued up the books. The dollars are matched to the actions that will happen in 2024.
I'm going to jump in, Councillor Chan,
Sure,
if that's okay.
sure. Yeah.
And someone sounds like they're preparing dinner in the background there. I see a few questions on public transit. I just want to say that in this staff proposed budget, under the guidance of Shirley Carroll, Budget Chief, and encouragement from Councillor Chan, there is a big investment in public transit. The TDC, remember last year, they raised the fare and cut the service. And that just spun them into a bit of a downward spiral. So we said, okay, no more fare increase. Let's bring the service level back up. Let's increase it so that more people would take it, so that it would generate more income, and then we can build it better. There's quite a few questions that I've noticed that talk about keeping it safe. So what TDC have done under our support and our investment is hired in each of the subway station that there are customer service officer at each of the entrance, and which means that you're going to get far more people at the station, more eyes on the platform to keep people feeling safer. And they also have people that are social workers to try to move the people that are sleeping in places they shouldn't be at our transit system out of the place. They have a bus to take them into the shelters. Those that have other issues, they're trying to work with them and work to make sure that they get the kind of treatment or go to places that are more suited for them rather than in the public transit system. In this budget that Councillor Carroll have put in, also have some investment and the wonderful new deal that we've signed in. The provincial government is finally uploading the Gardner and DVP. It also promised to invest some money onto TDC, which is great. They haven't done that for a long time. And they're also in terms of uploading and investing. And they also promised that, you know, those subway cars on Bloor Line is old. So they said they would help us build, buy new ones if the federal government come and also cost share it with them. So so there are lots happening, a lot of investment in TDC. Is it good enough? No, not at all. But one of your chat person said that it was downloaded by the Mike Harris government, which is true. And we now have to pay for 100% of operating the TDC and the cost of it. We are taking it a step at a time. We will continue working with the provincial and the federal government to bring them on side so that we could get more investment in the city. I didn't inherit this big financial mess, I should say, shortfall of $1.5 billion. And I'm so thankful for the staff and Councillor Carroll to try so hard in making it happen. We really need to bring the city service back on track because for a long time this has been decreasing in terms of the service level. We need to invest, bring everything back on track, deal with the financial mess, then we could create a city that is far more affordable, safer, and more caring for everyone. So anyway, sorry
Thank you,
I wanted to add in because there were a lot of questions on TDC.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do 2 more questions. The next question is about climate change. Jane Garson is saying that, you know, given that climate change is the biggest threat to safety of Toronto residents, why is Transform TO a city commitment from 2020 buried with only a brief reference? When can we get an actual breakdown of climate action operational capital costs, not just told that they are included throughout?
You know what, Councillor Chang, I think that is, if you want to add that, I think that's the first briefing note that should be asked for. It's awkward. We haven't had a report for a long time. We're due for one. I think it's actually expected after the budget, but we do need to spell out for people what investments will take place that are actually part of the climate action plan called Transform TO. This became a real concern for people when we were doing the big November pre-budget consultations, because we had, some of you may have attended, and we had the bar graph of all the various divisions, and they were looking for climate change. And at the very end of all of these tall bars was the tiny one at the end of this page that said climate change office. Well, that's the cost of a small policy shop that is making sure that Transform TO does go out to the transportation division, over to find out if TCHC is still working with TAF because we want their energy footprint down. So they're reaching out to every department. But it seems to me what you want is a report card, and that's fair, because the reality is when we did our last environment monitoring, we've seen population growth, and we've seen people buy a few more cars lately, and so our emissions didn't go down despite a lot of work going on. So you want to know what we're doing, but we haven't taken everything that's going on in every division and put it in a sort of a list, a report card type of list, and I think we should probably ask for that as part of the budget process, so that you can feel confident there is some funding going into it. and put all together on one page. If there isn't enough going into it, then you'll have a conversation that you can have with us and give us a hard time.
And if I may provide more context, yes, there will be a briefing note prepared by staff upfront, from the Environment and Climate Division as part of the budget process to talk about the city's progress in terms of the GHG reduction target. But as I mentioned during the presentation, I said that this 10-year capital plan, the City of Toronto continues to make investment in climate mitigation, adaptation actions to work towards the CO2 emissions. So my numbers, like based on the what I see in the budget, this 10-year plan, we have a total. We continue to make significant capital investment of more than $10 billion, and also operating budget is $63 million to support the delivery of the net zero and also transform TO initiatives citywide, collectively. It could be different kinds of initiatives.
There you go. They're already writing the briefing note.
Yes, they are already writing the briefing note, and the plan is to bring forward as part of the January 26th wrap-up budget committee.
And there will also be, as we said earlier, a report coming in the next few days or in the coming week about efficiencies, because I think that's something that I heard a lot of people mention tonight. And so the last question I'll put out there for this evening, and just to say that, my team and I have been recording all the questions in the chat, and we will work through them and we'll post them in on my website in the coming week, so that we will address the questions if they're not answered today. But Gail Valence is asking, what stops Toronto from implementing some of the revenue streams that other global cities use, such as a Toronto sales tax?
Oh, Gail, thank you so much for that question. The mayor's smiling, I'm smiling. It is a matter of our other government partners giving us permission. It's the structure here in Canada that the municipality is a creature of the province, and we both are forever asking the federal government to distribute their funds fairly, and so we need their permission. A sales tax, for instance, would put us on par with every core city in every one of the 50 states of the United States. They all have it. A councillor who thought I was blowing smoke didn't realize I'd done the research, and he started throwing names of cities at me. What about Houston? What about Baltimore? And I was naming the rates because I had just researched it. Well, it's funny you should ask about Houston. These types of revenue tools that exist, the reason you see it so prevalently down there, I read an amazing book right now. Mayor Chow might want to read it. It's called Mayors and Money. And it follows why cities are funded the way they are through the United States all the way back to the Depression. Sales tax is really a municipal type tool. Post-Depression, with all the agricultural community moving into cities in the depths of an economic depression, those cities got very rapidly larger. And that was a tool that was used to help them fortify what they could do with property tax and be able to accommodate all these new residents flooding into the cities and trying to start new lives. And so it started popping up at all of the large cities in states, Chicago, Houston, those are ones that had it by the 40s. The latest, ironically, was New York, who didn't get it until 1962. But we didn't have cities that large in Canada. And what happened was, as that was happening in the States, provinces looked south of the border and said, that's an interesting tool. We'll have one of those, please. And so provincial sales tax was born in Canada. But it actually works much better when it's used to deliver services directly. And who directly delivers services? The municipality. The other orders of government are far more likely to be transferring funds, not actually delivering the service. And when they're used here in Toronto, for instance, we would get, from just 1 penny on the dollar, you would get between 800 million and $1 billion of new dollars a year. Imagine the entirety of the transit systems property tax share suddenly being covered by another revenue tool. And that 1 penny, you think about it, if you go out and buy $100 pair of shoes, you're going to give $13 to the federal government and the province. We're just saying, how about one for the city? Just one. That's all we're saying.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you to Councillor Carroll, our budget chief, to our executive director of financial planning, Anthony Ng, and our mayor for dropping by. We will work through the questions that you have left in the chat. So if you haven't signed up for my email newsletter, please do sign up at lilychang.ca. That's where you will get the answers, is in our email. And in addition, my team has just left the link in the chat, and I'll just leave it again. This is a link to our survey, our Willowdale Action Hub survey. And the survey is also helping us kind of hear the voices of the community. We want to know your thoughts, and it's very specific. We do a survey about the windrows, which we know a lot of people are upset about. And so we really want to be able to consolidate all the information that people are sharing, and we will be sharing the survey as it comes in. So thank you, everyone, for spending your Monday night with us. And again, please sign up for making a deputation. This is your chance to speak to the budget committee. You get, I don't know if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, Councillor Carroll.
We'll see when people sign up, but if time allows, the one thing that's different this year is you can choose a time slot. It's not just, I'm going to pick Wednesday and hope for the best. You can pick I want to speak between 9:30 and 1:30, or I want to speak between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock. You'll see when you go on the website that it allows you to choose a time slot. And then if a time slot gets overloaded, we may have to say you have 3 minutes. So be prepared for it to be 3 minutes.
So the website, where you want to go for all your information is toronto.ca/budget. If you go there, you'll see a link to this information that I'm sharing right now, which is how to speak to the budget committee. And you can do it virtually or in person, but here in North York in the Civic Center, it's Tuesday, January 23rd. There's 1:30 to 4:30 or 6 to 9 p.m. And please don't be shy. It's okay if your English is not perfectly, pronounced. We want everyone to share their voice, and you can pre-write it and just read from it. That's fine too, but I really want to encourage you to take that bold step. It does make a difference in our democracy to hear the voices of our community. And on this budget website, so if you go to toronto.ca/budget, you can also click on the January 10th budget presentation, or click on budget notes and reports. And here you see all the divisions, and every division has their budget note. So if we go into, let's say, people really care about children's services, you take a look, you click in, and it gives you very clear information about their head count, what they're focusing on, their priorities, their challenges, and it's good reading. It helps you understand what the city is trying to accomplish through the many programs that are run. And if you find some fat to trim, I welcome you to take a look at all those notes and point it out to us. We welcome you to that process, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue. The mayor will release her budget on February 1st, and then ultimately it will be council's decision on February 14th what the budget looks like when it is passed. So thanks again, everyone, and we hopefully will see you next Tuesday night. If not, you can watch the budget meetings tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, live stream. If you go to if you Google Timmis Toronto, TIMMIS Toronto, you'll come to a page, you'll see a link for budget committee. And if you have nothing to do for 3 days straight, or you just want to let it run on a separate window on your computer, you could watch every department make their presentation, hear questions from counselors, including myself, and that will give you a really good overview of our wonderful city and what is happening across all the divisions. It's like a fast forward journey through the city by sitting through 3 days of budget meetings. So we look forward to a great 3 days ahead, and hope you'll join us. Thank you, everyone, and good night. Thank you again, Councillor Carroll. And
I can see Anthony still at City Hall. Thanks, Anthony. Get home and get some sleep.
see you tomorrow.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
see you guys tomorrow.
Very good.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
everyone, for being here. We really appreciate you being here. It means a lot to us.
Thanks, Lily. You guys have a great counselor.
Thanks.